On this day, 1992, Clint Eastwood's spectacular anti-Western Unforgiven opens in theaters and winds up not only grossing $160 million, but winning 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director for Clint, and Best Supporting Actor for Gene Hackman.
For men of low character.
We ain't bad men no more. We're farmers.
They're a lot of savages! A bunch of bloody savages! Assassin!
Well, I guess they have it coming.
We all have it coming, Captain.
Some legends will never be forgotten. Some wrongs can never be forgiven.
Any man don't want to get killed. Better clear on out the back.
Unforgiven.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all for spending some of your early Wednesday afternoon here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today marks 32 years since the release of what most people consider to be Clint Eastwood's finest achievement as an actor, as a producer, as a filmmaker, as a historical figure in the movie business. On August 7th, 1992, the film Unforgiven opened in theaters. Now, Unforgiven was a huge comeback for Clint Eastwood. This is a part of the history that could easily get lost in the shuffle because here we have Clint, who's 94. He's 94. And he has a movie in the can. Juror Number 2 with Nicholas Hoult and Toni Collette and Kiefer Sutherland, among others. The buzz is very strong on it. Warner Brothers seems as if they don't know what to do with it. David Zaslav, nobody seems to know which end is up. They're talking about maybe we won't even release it this year. It was going to open in competition at the Cannes Film Festival, and now we're not even going to get a chance to see it this year? What the fuck? Doesn't make sense. But the idea here is that some people would assume, because this guy is not only still working, but still getting top-level talent, well, he was just always at this level with very few slip-ups or hiccups or stretches in his career where he wasn't knocking out great films or getting to work with the best cast possible, and people were clamoring to work with him. Well, there was a time in the mid-1980s, almost 40 years ago, well, if 1984 is mid-80s, yeah, that is 40 years ago, where Clint Eastwood became mayor of Carmel, California. And he took a little bit of a break from the movie business. He only made one film while he was mayor of Carmel, California. A terrific film, Heartbreak Ridge, one of my favorites. Man, he's so good in that movie. But his career kind of dipped in the years following Heartbreak Ridge when he left politics behind. He hated it. He hated it. People used to say, well, how come you don't run for president? He goes, politics fucking sucks, that's why. He had more than enough of it, mayor of a small little town, dealing with the bureaucratic fucking bullshit. I'd rather go back to the bureaucratic fucking bullshit of making movies. He never actually said that, but that's the gist of what you get. There's a lot of great quotes of Clint on what it was like to be mayor of Carmel. That's his adopted hometown, by the way. But Clint, he had a number of movies that were just not good, but he also had movies which were good that failed to find an audience, and therein lies the rub. That is something that had not happened to him in his kind of salad days once the mid-60s and his incredible success in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, the spaghetti westerns that really not first put Clint on the map and then put him on a path to not just stardom, but global superstardom. A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, and the spectacular, easily one of the 5 best westerns ever made, if not top 3, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And so Clint was a big star by the end of the 60s, and he just continued to do his thing. But he was known for westerns. Westerns were always a big deal for him. And then there were even movies such as Dirty Harry, which were kind of like an urban western in the sense that you got a clearly delineated good guy who may have some shadings to him, and you have a very dastardly bad guy who doesn't have much in the way of shadings. So when Clint had this dip in the late 1980s, it appeared, not that his career was over. This is not, the guy was in his late 50s. He wasn't out to pasture. But it appeared that his time on the so-called A-list, his time as a major force in the movie business, that maybe had come to an end. Because he had this, he made a movie with Forrest Whitaker called Bird about the famous jazz musician and saxophonist Charlie Parker. A ton of people loved it. I think Clint might have gotten an award at the Cannes Film Festival for his directing. Nobody saw it. Then he had Pink Cadillac with Bernadette Peters. Not a good movie, and nobody saw it. The last Dirty Harry film, The Deadpool, 1988. Despite the fact you had Liam Neeson, Jim Carrey, and the always terrific Patricia Clarkson in major roles, the movie didn't exactly set the box office on fire. He did The Rookie with Charlie Sheen, a kind of cop action thriller. That was a bad movie which bombed. And he did White Hunter, Black Heart, which is his interpretation of what John Huston, the great filmmaker, Angelica's father, may have been like, what he may have gone through while he was shooting the movie The African Queen with Humphrey Bogart and I almost said Lauren Bacall, Katharine Hepburn. It's funny, I almost said Lauren Bacall because Lauren Bacall was married to Humphrey Bogart. So there would have been an understandable mistake, but a mistake we did not make. The idea, though, is that as 1990 came to a close and The Rookie tanked at the box office and White Hunter, Black Heart, although it had its offenders, there were a lot of people that loved that movie. It made a number of 10 best lists in the year of Goodfellas and Dances with Wolves and Awakenings and Reversal of Fortune, Dick Tracy, Warren Beatty, a very, very solid year for movies. But it appeared that his time as a superstar had ended. And it happens. It's movies, right? Tastes change. Audiences change. The people that were his biggest supporters, maybe they get a little older. They're not the target audience anymore. So Clint had purchased a screenplay called The William Munny Killings sometime in the mid-1970s. By a brilliant screenwriter and a real unicorn when you find out what else this guy wrote, named David Webb Peoples. And David Webb Peoples is a kind of magical name for people such as myself who were writers trying to get into the movie business, and with an understanding that there are certain successful people who are different than other very successful people because they could do incredible work across genres that you would never think, well, if he's great at this, well, there's no way he could do that. Yeah, well, David Webb Peoples not only wrote The William Munny Killings, what became Unforgiven, he also wrote Blade Runner. He wrote the screenplay for what became Blade Runner based on Philip K. Dick's novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So Clint had purchased that screenplay roughly around the time of Outlaw Josie Wales, which was 1976. And Outlaw Josie Wales is the movie that made Orson Welles, who to this day is arguably the most influential filmmaker worldwide in the history of cinema. It made Orson Welles a fan for the rest of his life. He loved Clint Eastwood. Yeah, I love the kid. He's a movie star. I love his filmmaking. He's the most underrated director working today. That's what Orson Welles said about Clint. He was an unabashed, huge fan. Clint always saw himself playing the lead role of William Munny in David Webb Peoples' screenplay, but he was not old enough. He was still too young. And after Unforgiven came out and was dissected by all corners of film criticism, from the accessible film criticism of people such as Roger Ebert and David Denby and Pauline Kael, and then regular reviewers for the Daily News, New York Post, and then the academic film theoreticians, the idea was the character of William Munny would be like if you took The Man with No Name, that's the character Clint played in the Dollars trilogy, what I mentioned before, the Sergio Leone films. We never find out what his name is. He is the man with no name. William Munny is that guy. Whether or not he's literally that guy or symbolically, he is somebody who was probably didn't have a heart of gold, was probably just an unrepentant sack of shit, who may have seemed heroic at times because there were other people in his path who were even worse than he is. And in the movie High Plains Drifter, Clint pushed that to its limit because the character he plays in High Plains Drifter, who is a bit of a man with no name himself, I don't think we ever get the guy's name, and there's even like a running gag. I didn't get your name. Well, I didn't give it. That character is horrendous. He is demonstrably worse than any of the man with no names that Clint played in the Dollars trilogy. But the idea is that William Munny is one of Clint's earlier Western anti-heroes, at best, all grown up, now in his 60s, supposedly reformed, but it won't take much for the old urge for mayhem and violence and killing to come back. But Clint knew he couldn't believably play this role correctly. See, this is another thing with Clint Eastwood. I mentioned how Sylvester Stallone is notoriously restless. Clint Eastwood is incredibly patient. He knew that as his career, and maybe he took on certain projects that, well, this probably won't be good, he did not think he was yet ready to play the character of William Munny. It's almost like this was Clint's golden ticket. Break glass only in the case of emergency. And with the dual failures of the Prestige picture, which a lot of people, as I said, there was heavy Oscar buzz for White Hunter, Blackheart, and many major critics loved it. It didn't really do that well. It didn't make any money, and it didn't have the critical reaction where you were going to get a drumbeat for a ton of Oscar nominations. It just didn't happen. 1990 was a pretty stacked year. If you ask me, Goodfellas should have won picture and director from Martin Scorsese instead of Kevin Costner for Dancing with Wolves. As much as I'm a huge Kevin Costner fan, baseball movies, love the guy. Almost did one of my scripts a million years ago. My Brooklyn Dodger screenplay, Kevin Costner apparently loved it, but he had just made For Love of the Game. So he said, reluctantly, I have to pass, but I want you to let your writer know I loved his script. Thank you, Mr. Costner, Oscar winner. Legend. But that's the idea, is that Clint's career had not really hit the skids, but it had slowed down a lot. And he could still get projects through, but he wasn't going to have unlimited carte blanche as he had. It doesn't mean that he didn't have to test screen or that when he was ready to do a screenplay that he didn't get notes. But he had almost unlimited creative control. Hey, this man made Warner Brothers massive amounts of money for more than 2 decades. He wasn't just a guy who made a couple of hit movies. He put a lot of projects on his back. And the thing with Clint Eastwood, I've said this before, but for those of you who are watching me for the first time, Clint Eastwood has a specific record that not only will it not be broken, nobody will even get 10% of the way there. Since he formed his own production company in the late 1960s, Malpaso Productions, that means bad step. Because when Clint told friends in the late 60s, I'm going to take greater control of my career, I'm going to form my own production company at Warner. They told me that they gave me the go-ahead, I'm going to do it. Don't do it, Clint. It's a bad step. Well, Clint, ever the iconoclast, F to the U, he not only did it, but he named the company Malpaso, winking at the morons who told him it was a bad step. Malpaso Productions. Every Malpaso production ever, 30-something, 40-something, whatever the exact amount, there's too many to name. Every movie that has ever been a Malpaso production funded through the parent company of Warner Brothers has come in on time and under budget. Every single film. And that is another reason why, even as his career slowed down, Warner Brothers had no problem when he came forward with the William Munny killings to the bosses. And they had just had some crazy shit happen, literally with Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas and Brian De Palma's The Bonfire of the Vanities, where the Warner Brothers executives, after test screenings just for the executives of both of those movies, and bear in mind, Brian De Palma and Martin Scorsese, like this. One guy went to NYU, the other guy went to Columbia. The studio execs were convinced Bonfire of the Vanities were going to win Oscars. Oscar nomination for Tom Hanks, Oscar nomination for De Palma. Vilmos Zsigmond is going to win for Best Cinematography. Scorsese fucked up Goodfellas. My God, this was such a great book. We love the script. What did Marty do with our money? So they had those backwards. because Bonfire ended up being the disaster and Goodfellas should have won the Oscar for Best Picture. So those executives were still trying to figure out how they could have gotten those two movies that wrong. Clint went to them and said, this I'd like for my next project. They immediately said, go for it, Clint. Do you know where you want to shoot? Yeah, I'm going to shoot in Canada. Terrific. You have a projected budget? Somewhere around 15 million? Fantastic. You have your cast? Yeah. Clint called Gene Hackman. Hackman took less money. He was so excited to work with Clint on this film. He read the script. He said, oh my God, I'm in. I'm fucking in. Got Morgan Freeman, pre-Shawshank Morgan Freeman, but Morgan Freeman had done a lot of great work for a number of years. Johnny Handsome opposite Mickey Rourke, fantastic. Street Smart, where he plays a pimp, opposite the late, great Christopher Reeve, amazing. Lean on Me, not a great movie, but he's great. Morgan, always a home run hitter. Clint got Sir Richard Harris. He got Saul Rubinek. His partner at the time, Frances Fisher, who later on played Rose's mom in Titanic. Clint had his cast, and he said 15 million max, and they were more than happy. They didn't even bother. I don't think they gave him notes on the script. Go make your movie, Clint. So Clint goes to make Unforgiven in the summer and fall of 1991, into the winter. It's supposed to be a town in Wyoming called Big Whiskey. He shot it mostly in Alberta, Canada. And there was a role of a young gunfighter who the studio asked if Clint would bring on a Rob Lowe type, an Emilio Estevez, the kind of guys that were in Young Guns. They wanted that sort of actor at that time. A Charlie Sheen, but it wasn't going to be Charlie Sheen. That's what they wanted. But Clint went with an unknown kid named James Woolvett, and he didn't have a big career, but when I tell you that casting was just as marvelous as getting Sir Richard Harris for English Bob, or Gene Hackman for Sheriff Bill Daggett, or Morgan Freeman as Ned, or Frances Fisher as Alice, the casting was perfect. So Clint shot the film, and the studio, they were excited because, you know what? Because Gene Hackman was still on the A-list. Oddly enough, at that point, he was more likely to be headlining a film than Clint. So they figured it's only cost us $14.4 million, and the marketing budget's not going to be crazy. There's almost no way we're not going to turn a profit. So they were starting to feel really good about it. The fact that they got this unbelievable cast so cheaply. But that's the magic of having, even then, a name like Clint Eastwood had a really good reputation of being an actor's director because he didn't like to waste time, and he never wanted to fuck around. People who went to work for him knew they were not going to spend all day in the trailer and then do 50 takes and the day's done. No more than 2 takes. That was Clint for you. 2 takes maximum. Let's get the fuck out of there. We got people who need to do other things with their day other than this. So Clint finishes, they finish shooting, he comes back home, he edits his film, and they get the music, a terrific musical score. Was it Lenny Niehaus? And Joel Cox, who ended up winning an Oscar for Best Editing. So he puts together a cut, if you want to call it a director's cut, but he puts together a cut of the film that he is comfortable with and he thinks it's go time. So whether it was him, whether it was the studio asking him, do you have a cut? That part, nobody really knows the mechanics of it because this stuff wasn't reported at the time. There's no social media. There's no Twitter. But at a certain point, Clint had this cut of the film that he screened for mostly the same executives, the same big shots at Warner Brothers that had completely cocked up Bonfire of the Vanities and Goodfellas. They nearly put all their eggs in the Bonfire of the Vanities basket and either took Goodfellas away from Martin Scorsese or flat out said, this is unreleasable trash. We're going to have to do a write-off. Thank goodness that didn't happen. But what I'm saying in this instance, very specific, just because a film has great buzz coming off of a studio executive screening, it doesn't mean the film is any good. It could be, but they also could fuck it up. As word leaked out with that first Bonfire screening, De Palma knocked it out of the park. No, he didn't. I love him. And that movie is not as bad as its reputation, but that was not a masterpiece. When Clint screened what was now called Unforgiven, it is the title of William Munny killings. It really wasn't sending that great of a message. They didn't want to do that. And I don't know exactly when the title was changed, but it's kind of like with Tom Cruise a decade or so ago, Edge of Tomorrow. That wasn't the original title, Edge of Tomorrow. The original title of that movie was All You Need Is Kill. All You Need Is the William Munny Killings. No, the title was now Unforgiven. Clint screened what he felt was his final cut of Unforgiven for the Warner Brothers studio execs, and they all went nuts. And they were expecting something good, given the fact that they all had liked the script. Maybe they had some notes that they didn't bother sharing with Clint. You know what? Let him make his movie. We love this cast so much. They were very confident going into the screening that Clint would have at least produced a good movie. Because there was nothing to indicate that his talent was slipping or anything wacky like that. Because they had all really liked White Hunter, Blackheart. That's the same year as Goodfellas and Bonfire. White Hunter, Blackheart screened before the other ones. They thought they were going to get Oscar nominations for that one. And the reviews reflected not a masterpiece, but a movie that had its defenders. And there were people saying that was Clint Eastwood's best film acting up to that point in his career. Rex Reed had said, I was never really a fan of this guy, I'm ashamed to say, but I'm a fucking huge fan now. He killed this one. So the studio executives, they watch Unforgiven and they hit the fucking ceiling. And word begins to leak in the best possible sense. Hollywood Reporter, Daily Variety, circa mid-February 1992. Buzz is already building that, believe it or not, Clint Eastwood is about to have the comeback that most people didn't think was happening or would ever happen. But it's going to happen. They are very confident. And our reporting, our sourcing has a high level of confidence. There are too many people saying the same thing about this movie. Not only will it make a lot of money, it is going to be nominated for Oscars aplenty. Sometimes they get it wrong, but in the case of Unforgiven, the irony is, if anything, they undersold it because they were nervous. They knew what had happened in 1990, with Goodfellas, with Bonfire, to a lesser extent with Clint's own White Hunter, Blackheart. They didn't really hedge, but they weren't as over the top as they could have been in their predictions of Oscar glory. So by the time Unforgiven was, where they were kind of screening the trailer a number of months before, I remember this very well. When I saw Lethal Weapon 3 in theaters, this would have been mid to late June of 1992. I was still in high school. My high school graduation, Massapequa High School, class of 1992. Watching Lethal Weapon 3, not great, not as good as the first two. There was a trailer for Unforgiven. And when Clint appears in the trailer, I saw this trailer 5 different times in movies that I watched in that time frame. I saw League of Their Own, The Babe with John Goodman, not that great. But each time Clint Eastwood appears on screen in the Unforgiven trailer, people in the audience cheered. I took that to mean that general audiences were ready for a Clint Eastwood comeback, the Clint Eastwood rebirth, revival, resurrection, whatever you want to call it. The advance buzz was pretty good, as I said, but even me reading Entertainment Weekly, people were saying this is the best film of the summer. The word is too strong here. There's no way it's not going to be good. There's too many people saying the same thing. So when Unforgiven landed on August 7th, I remember seeing all of the New York newspapers. I was working for my father. I was in the city that day. And all of the newspapers, New York City papers, gave it either 3.5 or 4 stars. And USA Today even said something like, Clint rides in and saves the summer. So all of the major critics gave the film huge, huge praise. And it really crushed the box office. Unforgiven, on a budget of no more than $14.5 million and not a ton in marketing. The total budget, it says $14.4 million. I think that was the production budget. But even if we say that the total budget is $20 million, the movie grossed just shy of $160 million 32 years ago. That is 8 times its cost. That is an incredible success, especially because this is not a happy Western. This is not a rollicking good time at the movies like the following year's Tombstone. Oh, I'm in my prime, with Val Kilmer. This is a somber, revisionist anti-Western, where the good guys aren't entirely good, and the bad guys don't necessarily seem like bad guys. I mean, Gene Hackman's a sheriff. I'm trying to clean up this one-horse town. Well, you're not doing a very good job. You're a fucking sociopath, but okay. The film made incredible amounts of money and got almost unanimous rapturous praise from critics. There were a couple of critics. Gene Siskel didn't like it. Gene Siskel's strange. He was the target audience, and he actually gave the film a thumbs down, which led to a major tongue lashing from his buddy, his partner, the late, great Pulitzer Prize-winning critic Roger Ebert, who had some reservations about the film, but he said, this is too good for me to do anything less than giving it 3.5 stars and thumbs up. And he was very disappointed that Gene didn't give it a thumbs up for the fact that the production was so impossibly well mounted. There was so much beauty and incredible landscapes, shots that look like paintings. Gene, what's wrong with you? This is the exact kind of movie you say Hollywood needs to make more of. Nah, I'm sorry, Roger. I just had too many problems with it. Ebert actually went back and revisited it several months later and realized that he had underrated it, that his 3.5 star review wasn't good enough, and he upgraded it to 4 stars and suddenly said, this is one of the best Westerns ever made. I don't know what the fuck Gene watched, but even I messed up the first one. 3.5 stars is not good enough for this movie. Unforgiven wound up winning 4 Academy Awards. Best Picture, Best Director, both Clint, because again, he was the producer, he was the coordinator, he was the point man behind it. Gene Hackman for supporting, and Joel Cox for his incredible editing. And editing is something that easily can get lost in the shuffle. But the way the gunfights, even the sound editing, although I don't think that one won, but the editing, the way that multiple lines of action are going concurrently is magic. And this is not a movie that should have high rewatchability factor because it's not happy. It has a lot of scenes of very upsetting and brutal violence. It's just so well made and so wonderfully acted by the entire cast. All of the actresses that play the women at Greeley's. Anthony James, who plays Greeley. He's great. It's nothing but home run hitters in the cast. So it was not an upset. Unforgiven went into those Oscars as the betting favorite to take those big awards. And Gene Hackman also was certainly the favorite to win for Best Supporting Actor. And there are certain moments in time, people like me, who is an enormous Clint Eastwood fan, if you haven't figured that out yet, my single favorite person who ever worked in the movie business. There are moments where it does feel like a big country club for the top names, the biggest stars, and the movers and shakers within the industry. Well, Barbra Streisand, the previous year, should have been nominated for The Prince of Tides. A flawed movie, but her direction is marvelous. She was given the honor, and I'm not trying to be funny, it's legitimately an honor, of presenting the award for Best Director. And the way that when she opened the envelope, she didn't just announce Clint, she smiled at him with adoring eyes and said his name. And Kodiak Auditorium went bananas. Right after that, it was Jack who got to announce Best Picture. Now, Jack was a little torn. I know he certainly wanted Clint to win if his movie wasn't going to, because Rob Reiner's A Few Good Men with Jack, who could have won for supporting actor. You can't handle the truth. You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. But when Jack opened the envelope, Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven, and a place went crazy. And there's a terrific picture with Jack Nicholson and Barbra Streisand and Clint. Now, all 3 of them are still around. But to my 18, 19-year-old virgin eyes, they already looked really old. Jack was in his mid-50s. Clint was 62. He was 62, going on 63. Barbara was 50, 51. But after all of that, the film wins the major hardware at those Oscars. And well deserved. This was not a Lifetime Achievement Award for Clint. Otherwise, he would have won for Best Actor, and he didn't. Big Al won for Scent of a Woman. Hoo-ah! Unforgiven was on Netflix. It was on Max for quite some time. I don't know that it's free on any platform as we speak, but if you haven't seen it, by all means, it is worth the $2 rental on Amazon Prime. It is a great movie. Despite the subject matter being often disturbing and upsetting, it is a masterpiece. I believe it is the best Western that Clint was ever part of, and I love the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is actually more conventional because Clint's character in that film has more heroic tendencies, kind of, than the William Munny that we're presented with in this film. I don't believe it's Clint's best performance. I think that the next year's In the Line of Fire is his finest film acting. And if I could have waved a magic wand and have him win a Best Actor Oscar, it would have been for that movie and not this one. But Unforgiven, released on this day, 1992, and 32 years on, if anything, it has only grown in estimation and appreciation from the historical perspective. Unforgiven, released August 7, 1992, produced and directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Sir Richard Harris, James Woolvett, Saul Rubinek, Anthony James, and a really strong Francis Fisher. This has been episode 271 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Wednesday afternoon here with me in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode sooner than you think. Until then,